Hi there, I'm Ben Pearson. Welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Every episode we talk through how to thrive in the tech world, not just survive. Now, if you want me to work with your team, just give me a shout. I love to help teams to be more influential, memorable and successful with their stakeholders. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to book a chat. Hi everyone and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Well, it's got to be one of the reasons we love tech. It is constantly changing. There's always something new and always something exciting. There's constant innovation. So every team in tech needs to always be adapting, always be innovating. And today, we're talking about innovation and how you create a culture of innovation. A whole team or organisation where innovation thrives. Now, our guest today is tech nerd turned entrepreneur and founder of Wubbleyou. So representing the northeast of England, please welcome to the show, Mark Renney. Mark, it is lovely to have you with us.
Ben, thanks for having me. This is class. I'm really excited to talk about this today and innovation in tech.
Brilliant. Well, it is brilliant to have you with us. And straight away, we've got quite an international audience, so I always like to do a quick accent check. We've had people from the Black Country. You are representing the far northeast of England. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I am, yeah. I'll try and I'll try and really accentuate that Geordie accent, but I might slip back into something else. We'll see what happens.
So some people might need Google Translate on just to help out in case it gets too broad.
Or I might get called out by some real Geordies. I'm unsure which.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming and joining us on the show to talk about, I think, what's a really exciting topic, which is how you build this kind of culture of innovation.
Yeah.
For people that haven't met you before, would you mind introducing yourself to us?
Of course. So, my name is Mark Renney, and I run a software development company called Wubbleyou. And what we're really good at, Ben, is building tech products that create results for scaling businesses. And scaling businesses typically need three things really. They need internal automation to help them be more efficient. They need business intelligence to help them make better decisions. And some businesses have like really great ideas, really great IP in their business already, and by productizing that and building that into a tech product, they can sell that worldwide to an audience across the world just by licensing IP that they already have. So those are the three things that we're really good at, and we that's what we work with our clients around. And why I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation is that a lot of those clients aren't technical innovators already, but they become technical innovators just through the process we have. And I want to talk through sort of that journey and rules that we've sort of pulled together around the things which help them and the things which hurt them.
So it's a repeatable process. It's not like an organisation is born innovative and then remain innovative. You're saying it's a repeatable set of processes and things and habits that you can go through that actually make you more innovative as a team or as an organisation.
Yeah, it's starting from leadership, culture, mindset, and then actually just the actions you take in the business. I think it's at several levels. I think that there needs to be sort of changes and adjustments in ways of thinking to be innovative, and I think any business can be innovative.
Yeah. And so let's just maybe so we're going to dig into the how. We're going to dig into these kind of things, and that's always the good meaty part, the good conversation. But if we just back up a little bit first, why do you need to be this innovative business?
Sure. And I think this is an important question. If we think about progress, people tend to think that standing still. People tend to think that standing still is a straight line, right? If they don't progress, basically they stay the same. What tends to happen is if you're not progressing, you're naturally falling behind because the average ability of every other business around you is improving. So standing still actually is a gradual decline.
Entropy.
Right?
Yeah, it's decline. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And like I know some great people, right, who run businesses, and they're still operating like they were 20 years ago. They're still using paper, they're still using Excel. You see this a lot in professional services, say like accountancy firms who haven't adopted, say, like digital tools around accountancy. And, people setting up businesses now will be evaluating their options and looking at those businesses and thinking, do I really want to be sending my receipt in via the post? Especially Gen Zs and millennials, right? They're digital first generations. And I think, innovation is important because of that. If you're not moving forward, if you're not at least keeping pace, then you're actually just falling behind. And it's not like a short, sharp failure with a business either. It's like a gradual decline to the point where actually, things are just too hard to operate. And that's what we want to help businesses avoid. We want our clients to actually move faster than everyone else in their industry.
And it's that inertia, isn't it? If you've become part of an organization where this is how things are done, right? So this is the way it's done, and you do it, and then you're super busy, and now you're under stress, and then somebody says, oh, and now we can just change how we do that for little perceived, benefit, for those. That's really hard to do, to kind of take an organisation. And it's interesting, so I've been running my own business now for 2 years, and there's processes and things that I set up maybe 2 years ago that I kind of think, well, I could probably improve this now, but do I want to make the effort to do that? And I just get the thing done that I need to do, and then and there's almost like a little bit of a weight, because you can feel that culture of innovation almost disappearing unless you feed it, unless you continue to do it. So so I guess it's something like this. It's trying to get your organisation into a mindset where it knows it needs to innovate, it embraces that innovation and wants to, as opposed to be thinking, oh, I'm so busy and stressed, this is just another thing I've got to do.
It's, I think that's a really important point, Ben, because like a common thing people will say, right, is I'm too busy. I'm too busy to change that. I'm too busy to show someone else how to do that, right? So, a common situation we encounter, right, is, someone will reach out and, let's say, it's an ops director of a company which is turning over 7 or 8 figures a year, right? They start that business because they wanted freedom, right? But actually what they've ended up doing is constructing this prison around themselves, because they're working 80 hours a week. They've got 50 to 100 people in their team, but like they're still running the day-to-day operations. And in their mind, they're too busy to show anyone else how to do it. It's too hard. Like the fundamental things underneath them for them to be able to hand those things off don't exist. So it's not a simple thing for them in their mind of just, oh, well, I need to give this, give parts of this role to other people. In their mind, it's like, wow, to do that, I have to probably invest hundreds of hours of time that I simply don't have to do that.
Yeah. And
that's accumulation of all of the lack of innovation probably over the last decade of time, So just kind of like, it's like a blocked pipe, it all kind of builds up to the point where it's like that person, they can't, they can't keep doing what they're doing, or their exit strategy is to sell the business, but that reality is they're probably just going to die at their desk, because they're, and it's, I guess that's a direct way of putting it, but like that's a situation I think a lot of business owners put themselves in almost by accident, and no one wants that, right?
Yeah. So we're thinking about how do we get a team, a business to really be thinking, right, okay, we're going to constantly always be changing. We're always going to constantly be innovating, which means we'll get the benefits of being fit for the next generation of workers. The products will be digitized, and hopefully they're going to be the most efficient versions of those products, of those processes, so that their productivity of their organization is going to go up.
Yeah, and we have 5 rules around this of like 5 things that businesses can do to sense check this, and fundamentally make small steps around this as well. Like this should be, this shouldn't be like a massive change in one go. This should be like lots of small steps, like evolution rather than revolution. As I've heard it before.
Well, you teased me there, Mark, because you told me that you've got 5 rules. Should we go through them? Let's share. Let's get rid of them at the top. Let's tell everybody what are your 5 rules, and then should we dig into each one? So 5 rules for creating a culture of growth and innovation.
Yeah, sure. So if I just run through the 5 of them now, and then we can We can talk through each one in depth. Number one, I think it's really important to have big vision but small steps. Number two, where we implement this, we've got to be thinking about, what's our theme? Like, what's the one thing that unites everyone in the business? How do we put a roadmap around that? And how do we set objectives, like tangible objectives that people are accountable around? Third, businesses tend to be really forgetful, and we need to build a business brain. Number four, psychological safety and mindset in the business is paramount. Innovation, will fail without that. And five, a really pragmatic step, we've got to find the strategist in the business and pair them with someone who can execute. And, those five things, I think, fundamentally give us a really strong recipe and culture for innovation.
Okay. Like it. Right. Well, should we unpack? Let's go through those, shall we? Should we unpack those? So let's start. Number one, I think you said big vision, small steps, if I'm right.
Yeah. So where this comes from, Ben, right? When we speak with businesses, right, what they tend to have is, like lofty goals, right? We're talking about scaling businesses who want to disrupt in their industry, and they are typically doing that, right? Typically they just haven't got the tech bit figured out yet. And what can happen is if you have, a big vision and big steps, is you end up in a situation where progress really isn't made because like each individual step is just too hard. So what we've really got to do is set like that big vision, so we've got something really big to work towards, but then understand, okay, what are the smallest steps we can take right now, right? Even if they're tiny, minute, to move towards that. And that's important because we've got to start to build habits within the business and see results. If we have in the business a drive for innovation and then no progress, I think you start to build a culture of fatigue. Like they're talking about that again, but actually we're just talking about the same things we talked about last month. And I think that fatigues people in the team, where we want the opposite, right? We want people to see results and understand, well, actually, we said we would do those things, we did them, and we know that the things that we talk about next are going to be achieved as well, And I think, a salient example around this, right, is a surprising number of businesses businesses which are maybe turning over 7 figures don't use like a CRM for sales, like a customer relationship management system, right? They get leads through via phone or via email, and they just manage that whole process via the email inbox or notes that they write down, right? And I think that can work when you're sort of like 6 and 7 figures, if you've got people who can always sort of be there and deal with those things quickly. But what tends to happen is, these, leads come in, you're not tracking them properly, you're not following up properly, and then you're leaving like, probably a 6-figure amount a year on the table in things that you're just not responding to or following up on, and it starts to become like a significant percentage of things that, just, deals which maybe are winnable, but aren't won. And I think why businesses end up not putting CRMs in place is because they look at what they need to do to put a CRM in place and go, right, if we do this, we need to change process like across the whole front of house of the business. We need to integrate it with whatever we're doing for project management and delivery. And it looks like a monumental task. And therefore it's never done, right? Or it's talked about a lot and then never done, which I think is worse. And I think, that needs to be flipped on its head and say, okay, well, how do we put a CRM in place that, initially one person uses and everyone else still does what they did before, but one person is now using it? And then, okay, once we've done that, how do we look at the edge of that person's role and what they connect to? And then as another step, see what process and who we can pull in, and then start to make it like a step-by-step thing, rather than, okay, we're going to now, from 2 months' time, everyone's using a CRM. And that's what I mean by sort of big vision, small steps.
Yeah. No, I love it, and it's this idea also like small value quickly. So you take
Yeah,
a small step and you get small
yeah,
value, but it's
yeah,
quick. And people, I've seen it with data platforms where people have like want to deploy this massive, all singing, all dancing data platform, but the problem that means is it's rubbish for everyone. It's just generic
yeah.
because it's so huge. And actually, if you just fixed it for one person and gave them an amazing experience, and then took the next user and did that, you build momentum, goodwill, value all quickly, as opposed to just this monolithic big vision and getting caught up in the big vision.
Exactly. And I think value quickly, as you mentioned there, I think is so important because, the more people it touches, the exponentially more complex it gets. And, it can mean that, well, actually, it's ready for like 95% of people, but because it's not ready for, one rule, you then you can't use any of it, because you've kind of intrinsically tied it all together. And I think it sort of avoids those problems as well. You can just do things way more quickly without having to worry about like all of the different things that it touches. And rubbish for everyone. I think that's such an important phrase as well, because I think that's easy to do when you do too much at once.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next one. So we've done big vision, small steps.
Yeah.
What's the next rule?
So, if we think about we've got our vision, right? What we need to do then is bridge the gap between vision and small steps. And I think the best way to do that, right, is to think about, okay, like what's our theme? Like what's the thing in the business right now which creates the most opportunity or is the biggest problem? And then how do we create like just focus across, the team which is doing the innovation, like just on that one thing. And then what we then do is build a roadmap around that. Okay, over the next 3 to 12 months, like what are tangible outcomes and markers of success that we want to measure around that, and how do we lay that out, in weeks or months, so we can measure that things are moving in the right direction as well. Like how do we make sure that we're directionally correct, even if we don't stick to a perfect plan? And then how do we create tangible objectives off the back of that? So that might be, like OKRs, for example, or just some way to measure like smart, tangible goals, and give people accountability and responsibility for those things. And I think roadmaps and objectives, I don't, that's not unique thinking, right? But I think what I found really works really well is thinking about a theme. So, and what I mean by a theme is that when we talk about a vision, right, that tends to be, sometimes it's not measurable, like what we want to achieve, right? Like for example, some people might say, like it's not like it's like a financial target, right? It might just be something which is a bit less measurable. And I think sometimes you can move in a direction which isn't measurable, but is clearly beneficial for the business. So for example, you might have a theme which is quality first time. We have like customer success. Like what do those things mean? And it's not like you can measure those things, right? But it's just like what's the one thing that we want everyone in our business thinking about, so that when we're talking about roadmaps and objectives, it must contribute towards that thing, because that's the thing which is the most painful thing in the business right now, or the thing which creates the best outcome.
Yeah.
I think that's why themes are important, because you can create a theme which is not measurable, and then create roadmaps and objectives aligning with that theme which are measurable.
Yeah, it's the old. Yeah. I've just got the old adage, isn't it, of talking to a stonemason in ancient times. They're hammering like the 9,000th brick or whatever that he's shaped that day. Yeah. And what is he doing? Is he hammering a stone, or is he building a cathedral? And maybe the fact that he's building the cathedral, that's the vision. He doesn't maybe get the ornateness of it, the scale of it, the fact it's going to take hundreds of years to build, all of that. But he knows, that is what I'm doing. I'm building a cathedral. But the reality of that means I'm hammering 9,000 stones or whatever a day. But he's able to clearly, there's that golden thread back to the vision.
Yeah, exactly. Because when everyone who's ever set a 3 or 5 year plan like knows that it's more of a, am I directionally moving towards this thing, rather than, if I set that out now and I set weekly objectives towards a 5-year plan, you're never going to be able to do that, because by week 3, like, that plan is totally kaput, because things happen, right? So I think, you're right, Ben. It's like, we're building the cathedral. There's still masons hammering on that one thing, and let's just do things which kind of bridge the gap between it to make sure we've got the compass right without, like, it's not like we're setting GPS coordinates for the whole route now. We just want to know that we're walking in the right direction.
Yeah. So we've got 2 so far: big vision, small steps, theme roadmap objectives. What's the third rule?
So don't be forgetful and build a business brain.
Okay, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
So, right, I think I think a lot of businesses can struggle, I think, with systemizing what it is that they do. Building tools, building documentation, building the right assets within the business, so that if that thing needs to be done again, it can be done very easily. And you see this a lot, right? So, especially in a small business, it's like, this person's leaving and we've got to document everything that they need to do. Everything that they've learned over the past 10 years, we need to document, and we've got 4 weeks to do it. And it's like, okay, right, that's, you're going to forget a lot there as a business, because like, someone's going to walk out the door with it. and that's what I mean. And I think, on top of that, that person in that role, has probably forgotten a lot of stuff if they're not writing it down, because, we forget like 60% of what we learn, like, the day after we did it. And the way we fix that is we have a really strong mechanism for capturing what we learn, capturing documentation, and then building that into repeatable processes. So how we do that as a business is we use Notion as an operations manual. So,
Okay.
We have documentation on how to do, the majority of our processes, anything from running payroll to, doing things in the business, to our sales process, how we market. And, that's like our memory, right? So we can go back to that and see how we can do it. And then what we do is we use software called ClickUp, which is project management software, but we use it as like our operating system for the business, right? So wherever there's tasks that we need to do, which are, tasks can be generally one of 3 things, right? It's something repeatable, like that has to happen on a regular basis, like payroll, right? Like if a business doesn't pay that team is probably not coming in next month. So that's something which has to happen every month, and you've got to do it, right? So it's a repeatable process that can live in something like ClickUp and reoccur every month, and then you assign it to someone, link it to the documentation, right? And it's, oh wow, okay, we as a business, we've remembered how to do that process, and it's now really easy to do, and we can really easily assign it to other people. If someone leaves, if someone's on holiday, so we've got repeatable things. We've got ad hoc things, which are, things which just come in, which have to be done, so for example, if one of your clients like rings up and asks for something, okay, that's an ad hoc task, right? Let's get that in something like ClickUp and track that we've got to do it. And if there's a process that we can link it to, because it's something that we've done for other clients, great, we can link it to that. And then someone can just follow that process. And then there's templated tasks. So templated tasks are typically things that don't happen on a regular basis, but they happen like when other certain events happen. So for example, if you win a project and then you've got some like pre-project checklist that you need to go through, great, okay, we can turn that into a templated task. We can link it to the right documentation, and then it just gets assigned to someone to get done. And those become real assets, right? Because it's like, when you're innovating and you learn something, it's like, oh, great, okay, let's write the documentation for it. Let's get it as the right task type in ClickUp. And then we can just do that thing going forward. We can assign it to the right person, and then, we're kind of good to go. But I think a lot of times the opposite happens. You run a project and, you learn things. Everyone talks about, yeah, we need to make sure we don't do that again. And then the exact same thing happens again, because, it never went through that process to make sure that, something material changes to make sure it never happens again.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah. It's hard though, isn't it? Because In my experience, the documentation is the last thing people want to do, the
Yeah.
last thing people do, and therefore, and the other bit is the maintenance of it. So
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
might get excited and go, "Oh, I've documented that," but then the app changes, and now the screenshots that you've used or the things are wrong now. And then they're a little bit wrong, but you can still get through it. But then in a year's time, they're a lot wrong, and now it's not even in, and so that's it always seems to be the challenge with that documentation. No one wants to do it, and if they do it, it goes out of date so quickly.
Yeah, I think documentation is way harder when you're on the cutting edge of something. So building tech documentation's hard, right? Because you build like a complex engine for something, like you said, and then like 3 or 4 weeks later, like that's improved quite a bit, and the documentation's out. Someone needs to go back and do that. Or if you're working agile, the trope is it just never gets done. But I think in business operations, there's a lot of things that you do which don't really change after you started doing them. Like payroll just doesn't really change. You're just paying more money normally if you're growing. So it's like for those things, I think it's perfect because what, and I think that's where you should start. Look at like what's really consuming time from the managing director and the leadership team, and what can you build like small steps, right? Like what are the things you can build some really small things around like this, and then start to delegate them out.
Yeah. Love it. So we got 3. So that was don't be forgetful, build a business sort of brain.
Yeah.
4th rule.
Psychological safety.
Okay.
Paramount.
Okay. What does that mean?
So psychological safety is, in a nutshell, it's like people being accountable for their responsibilities and their roles, but like no one's under blame or under fire when mistakes are made, and that's really important. And there is balance to this, right? The crux of it is like people shouldn't really be punished for making mistakes, because when it comes to innovation, mistakes are inevitable. So therefore, punishment is inevitable, and I think it can create a culture in a business where people are fearful to then innovate because they know that they're bound to make a mistake somewhere and they get punished for it, and it becomes I think businesses that have that struggle to innovate. And this can happen sometimes when you've got like someone really bullish in the leadership team who's got really high standards, and they just don't accept anything other than perfect. But you can't have perfection when you innovate, because you're learning how to do it basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think it's hard to achieve because there's a real balance between that, like between blame, but actually, making sure that people are held accountable if they are not achieving objectives, if they're making the same mistakes over and over again, they're not following process. So it's like, and I think that is a really hard tightrope to walk, if that makes sense. But I think clear things that can be fixed in a business, if people are punished or admonished or whatever it is for making mistakes, those things have to be kind of rooted out at the very beginning to make sure that people can experiment and innovate and make mistakes without kind of coming under the cosh for it.
Yeah, and it's that sort of personal accountability and fail fast. I think if you can couple those two together, so if you've hired people and have got people that take accountability and want to do things well, and they want to innovate, and when things go wrong, they're going to then go, okay, this went wrong. Now they're going to do some learning. This is why it went wrong. Now they're going to update the documentation or whatever it is, and they're going to report that up the chain and go, this is what went wrong. This is why it went wrong. This is why it won't go wrong again. Next.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got that file for that is wonderful. But it's if you've got to that place where every failure now is a massive failure, and people aren't encouraged to do that, or people hide it. They don't take accountability, so they make failures, but then they're going, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault, I'm the victim here, nothing that I could possibly learn or do differently. You don't want a team full of that either, sort of failing with that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you just hit the nail on the head, to be honest, Ben, because when you start tipping at that territory as well, like innovation is really hard. because people will not want to, people either won't, or they'll deflect, or they won't want to sort of push into this territory where innovation for me is like, people understand, like they're not personally, going to get blamed or punished for anything which goes on here. Like, we succeed or fail as a team. We all pull our weight. When something's going wrong, we all jump in to fix it, and we learn from it. And I think this can become apparent sometimes. It's when you've got an innovative company which is working with a company which is at the other end of the spectrum. I think you can see some really interesting things happen. Normally, a real clash of culture, and I do think I do think it's especially important for anyone who is thinking about building tech or bringing in a tech partner or tech people. They need to evaluate this in their own business before they do this, because without understanding that, I think tech does. I think tech companies generally do focus more on psychological safety than other industries. And I think if you're a business which hasn't thought about this before, and you start to bring in tech companies to do things with you, you might see that difference in culture. And there's probably things that both businesses can change better to work together. But I think some self-reflection there can always help as well.
Yeah. Fifth rule. We're motoring through the time. Fifth rule.
So, I think it's really important to pair a strategist with an executor, and this is where it starts to become real, actionable. So, I think what can happen sometimes, right, is you end up with a lot of talk around innovation. Oh yeah, we need to do this. We're going to do this. We've got this big vision, and then next week, next month, we're talking about the same things, and then not really much is happening in between. And I think this can happen especially when you've got people in the leadership team who are largely like visionary, or they're too busy to do these things themselves. And I think it's fair to say, like, a lot of leadership teams kind of fall into one of those two camps, right? They've got the vision because they want to get there, and then they're still very good at action. It's just like really busy doing other things, running their business. I think this is where it really pays off to find someone in the business who has the right mindset. They're curious, they want to change things, and with some empowerment and some nudge in the right direction, and a vision and the freedom to do this, like, they will really excel. They will grab a hold of things, and they will start to influence and make this change. And really good example I've got of this, right, is I was speaking to someone about 6 months ago, runs a business, 100 to 150 people, and growing very quickly. And that's sort of a visionary, right? Sort of big vision. And they had someone in the business who was in the admin team, just doing like admin things. And that person started coming to the MD and saying, could we do this better? Could we do this better? And they did give them that space. They set them that sort of roadmap, those sorts of themes. And that person has grown to director level just by simply just grabbing a hold of things and fixing them, basically taking that action to move things forward. Lots of small steps. And I think that's what other businesses need to want to make this change. They need to find that person in the business and give them that freedom and responsibility, and I think good things start to happen if you can find that person.
Yeah, it's that kind of. It's going back from your your themes, roadmaps, and objectives. You need your themes, you need your roadmaps, but then you need so and so is going to do this thing by that date.
Yes.
And a list of those, and we're going to execute on those, and somebody's going to chase those up, and all of those things need to happen, and they maybe need to happen next week and the week after, and it becomes a routine, and there's a bit of grit and a bit of a grind and all of that kind of stuff. You can't just have the vision. It's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And if I think about myself, I know I need support with that on the execution, because I just start to get a bit bored, if I'm honest. Do you know what I mean? I've got the theme, I've thought it through, I've done the exciting thinking, I've proved it can happen once or twice, and then that iterate. Here's my task list of things that I need to. I just find that deathly boring.
Yeah, I know, but I'm the same. I really like to start things. I like to build things, right? So I'm probably more like you, where like to do that really exciting bit. Prove it can happen, and then figure out a way to get it on someone else's plate. Then watch it grow.
Yeah.
Like that's what because I like to do, I guess, new things and start things and build things.
Yeah. And that's your whole point, is you need the execution, you need the muscle, you need that ability to execute, and otherwise it's just a big idea that goes nowhere. It's not something that comes to fruition.
And some people love that,
Yeah.
which is great, right? I wouldn't want to live in a world full of me, so I'm glad there are other people who really just like love doing that, and who are really good at it. And I think that's like pairing. I think that's why it's really effective when you find those two sort of archetypes and pair them up. So I was on the board of a charity for 5 years, and my objective when I was there, so I headed up an IT and digital innovation group there, about 100 odd people in the charity, and we did the same thing there as well. We set a strategic working group around this. How do we transform this charity? And then there was one person in the business who really sort of stepped up and came forward and really executed on that. And once we saw that, it was we had tangible projects that we were laying out as a working group, and then they would just go and get done. We were seeing software being implemented and processes being sort of streamlined like all over the shop, and the improvement that it made was massive. We're talking sort of like 6 figures of improvement across the charity, and again, small steps. And I think if you could pair those things together, like really good stuff starts to happen.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I reckon time has almost escaped us, Mark. Really fascinating. So maybe we can start to sort of wrap up. What would be the key takeaways that you'd love people to take from this session today?
So, I think one key thing would be, as how can businesses be less forgetful? How do you build that business brain? Because I think that is something which is, of all the things we talked about here, it's probably the most actionable thing that business can do to move them forward. And I think one way to look at this is that businesses should view their processes, their systems as like reusable assets that they can make. So if you've got something which is with constant mistakes being repeated, right? So, okay, how do we build the right asset behind this to turn it into the right process, the right checklist? Can we automate it? Like, what are things that we can do to make sure that thing doesn't happen? And there's a good book around this called 24 Assets by Daniel Priestley, which is quite cool as well in terms of how do you view everything across the business as an asset that you can make, rather than something which is just like, not that tangible, just something which is kind of trapped in someone's head. So I think that is one thing. And if I was to give one other thing, Ben, I think is just a quick framework, and it's something that we call the 1% Club.
Okay.
And I think businesses can find themselves in a situation, right, where there's so much going on, there's so many things to fix, they just have no idea where to start. And I think that's a really tricky position to be in, right? Because it's like every time you think about it, it's tiring, because there's, you try to map it out and it's like, God, there's so much. You fill a Trello board or a big whiteboard or whatever it is, and it's like, God, where do we even start with this? And I think there's a framework we've got which prefers action around this, which is, okay, like map out as much as you can in 2 hours, prioritize it, and then focus on making 1% improvements every week. And that is as simple as, every person, you create a small group of people, 5 people, and every person in that group picks something off the board of things that you've sort of listed out as things which are wrong, and just does like one small thing to move towards improving that. And 5 people over 12 weeks making those 1% changes to improve things makes such a huge difference. And just where this came from. So I brought on my business partner in 2020, and I was commercial director. He was ops director, and it was kind of scary, right? Because it's like, okay, well, I've got my job to do, which is already a lot of time, and then suddenly, all the things he has to do, someone's got to do them, right? And it's looking like it's going to be me, and trying to figure out how we do that. So, we had 12 weeks to do it, and after sort of mapped it all out, and then a week later we hadn't made any progress. I was like, if we carry on like this, I'm going to have a real problem because we've already lost a week. So, we mapped all that stuff out, and then my theme at the time was like, okay, I want to automate accountancy because that seems to be the thing which is going to have the highest impact, and it's going to be the thing which, well, I really don't want to do it for a start, and I think we can largely automate that. And then we brought in our accountants, and then we give them this theme, and we said, right, how do we do this? And every week we started to do those things. We took one thing, we either automate it, we found a way to delegate to someone else, or we just stopped doing it, or we realized that I would have to do it. And by the end of that 12 weeks, we got everything moved over to a manageable situation. But accountancy went from something which was hours and hours a week to maybe 2 to 4 hours a month. We automate payroll, we automated the way that we get receipts and invoices in the business, and it's all really streamlined now. And we actually have a framework around this that we can give away if anyone wants it.
Okay.
So that's the sort of impact it can have. Had such a profound impact on me and how I felt about the business at the time. And I think, if you're feeling lost or stuck, think about how something like that can get you started,
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, lovely. I think key takeaways for me as I sort of reflect on it, building on that, just the idea of small things, just constantly doing small things, aligned to the big themes, but actually doing stuff. And I love the whole psychological safety of, which comes from me as an individual taking accountability and being allowed free to make mistakes and empowered to change things, and,
yes.
and that whole psychological safety, and then taking small steps. I really, really love it. So Mark, thank you so much for everything that you've gone through. If people want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, find out more about Wubbleyou, where can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so 2 ways. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on there. So I'm assuming there'll just be a link around somewhere that people can click around that. And then...
Yeah, I'll pop that in the show notes for people to get hold of you. Yeah.
Amazing. Our newsletter.wubbleyou.co.uk, which will probably be a link for as well. We create a lot of assets that we give away around things like, automating accountancy, how to do some of the things that we talked about here. So if you want just access to those things for free, sign up to our newsletter and it'll just land in your inbox every month.
Brilliant. Well, final thing for me to say is really insightful. Thank you so much for your time and energy and for all the insight that you shared with us. So thank you so much, Mark.
No, thanks for having me, Ben. I've really enjoyed this. It feels kind of cathartic, actually, just sit and talk about it. There's a lot of, there's a lot of this which is, learned just through observation, but obviously battle scars as well, so it's quite nice to talk about.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant to have you with us. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, there we go. Thanks for listening. Remember, if the podcast is not enough for you and you want weekly tips delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Elevated You newsletter. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up. Oh, and can you do me a favour? Could you subscribe to the podcast and rate the show? It really helps spread the word.